as winter storms batter the frigid landscape. Those forced to survive the onslaught seek shelter and warmth anywhere they can find it. And here, a lone cavern in the midst of the blizzard, and inside it, a piping hot fire. But what is that inside? What kindling was used to create something so molten hot? Well, that would be the Fnaf takes in today's video, or well, they're pretty hot. So, without further ado, let's get right into them. Goofy Goober writes, "This is a repeat from the last one, but here goes. 1. I feel like the crying child is extremely overrated. He showed up for one game yet never showed up again, and I hate that his death basically kickstarted the whole story, probably. I honestly wish that Afton didn't have a family. The Afton era focuses way too much on Afton and his family, and I wish it focused a bit more on the actual locations and the effects of Afton fully, instead of going on a side quest to explain why Afton's little Timmy murked 5 night guards. Yes. So, no. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The thing is, I think the crying child's popularity was really assured by the fact that his story never got true closure. For us, I mean. We don't really know his full deal or why the games keep referencing back to him. There's hints all over the place suggesting that the crying child might have been a bigger character, but at the end of the day, he was really only in one singular game, and we don't know where he went after that. And it's that lingering mystery that makes him a good talking point anytime there's a theory with an open-ended answer. But really, I do agree. I don't necessarily think that we have to constantly go back to Afton's family. That's why I was kind of sort of blah on the whole thing about Vanessa being another Afton. Because, you know, sure, we can keep Afton around if we want, but we don't have to have every single person of any importance be related to him. I mean, Afton might be rabbit-coded, but I doubt he multiplies that fast. 2. I am completely obsessed with the pre-release Pizzaplex. Its map makes me want to shut off my brain and aimlessly explore it, and I yearn for more info about it. I agree. Have you seen the giant boiler room? That thing looks so cool to me. That reminds me of something out of Oddworld. And I think, I know that it wouldn't be that simple, but having a game where you could, or having like a mod where you could see the entire map and walk around like one of those liminal space games that keep popping up all over the place where you just walk around and enjoy the sights, that would actually be pretty cool. 3. The Mycelium Man, the blue one, is the best MCM mascot in my opinion. I do love his jaunty little walk. 4. I absolutely adore Afton's character in Secret of the Mimic. He genuinely feels like a stingy corporate owner, and the way he finessed Edwin's assets was diabolical. I agree. I've seen some pushback on the idea that Afton had to take anything, but Afton definitely strikes me as the type of person who would just all out steal from someone, not because he couldn't create it himself, but because he's so envious that he has to have it. What we know of his character is his ego and his envy. That is specifically the reason why he targets Henry in the books, and that's pretty much the only example we really know about their relationship. One of the biggest relationships in the game series. So yeah, getting to actually see him working his magic and have it not just be his murderous tendencies is actually really neat. 5. Music Man's representation in the newer games makes me giddy, especially Big Top. I agree, I really liked Big Top. 6. I'm honestly kind of bummed out that Tales Games wasn't canon, but I adore the story of Secret of the Mimic so much that I'm honestly glad that they didn't go the book route. I agree. I particularly did not like how Edwin was portrayed in the books, and I think the twist of having the Mimic originally made not to replace David, but to replace his deceased wife Fiona, made a lot more sense if you really think about it. Sorry if this was long, I just wanted to get my thoughts out. Love your vids, by the way. Keep up the good work. Thank you, I'll try. Fluffball writes, I recently came up with my own hot take, and I haven't heard anyone talk about this before, so I hope it makes it original enough. Haha. In my opinion, I think it would have been an interesting decision if both Charlie and Sammy both possessed the puppet. After all, he's only really in the books and we don't know much about him, and he's never mentioned in the games, I believe. So this could have been a way to introduce him to the games and give him a character while keeping book and game Sammy separate with their differences in story. I also think this would give a reason to why the puppet is on a similar level to Golden Freddy, With another hot take I'll say in a second, it would make sense for the two most important and powerful possessed robots in the series to have similarities, rather than just because. So you're saying they would be conjoined twins? Okay, that's dumb, but the idea is actually very smart. Your idea, not mine. So I agree, either that, or I think it would have been a cool idea if the games and the books were flipped, where in the games, Charlie was the puppet and Sammy lived, and in the books, Sammy was the puppet and Charlie lived. My other hot take is that I find it way more interesting if Cassidy died in the Fredbear Springlock suit rather than stabbed or something like the other 4 MCI kids. With Agony and Remnant being a thing in this universe, I feel like she's the perfect way to explore the dangers of them and playing around with things you don't understand. It would also show William Afton was actually performing an experiment with his killings, when that part of his character is more hinted at in games and more obvious in the book lore. It would also explain why the crying child isn't as aware as Cassidy is in Golden Freddy. She has more agony and overpowers him, maybe even making the FNAF world for him to keep him unaware of the horrors of their situation. Either way, I think it would be much more interesting storytelling. Heck, make her a problem child or something if you want to give her more in-universe reason for her spiteful and aggressive behavior. I agree, in the sense of the one you shouldn't have killed, should probably have a death that's not just, I was stabbed by William Afton, because so many other kids have had this happen to them, and then end up in these clunky robot bodies that can barely move, and then you have Golden Freddy out there popping in and out of existence. There has to be something more to it. But, hey, who knows? Maybe it's just that there's a few more kids in there. Bailey Johnson writes, I'm sure this isn't really considered a hot take anymore, but I just want to get it out there since it feels like a safe space to voice my opinions. If Glammike is ever revealed to be canon, it would completely destroy Freddy as a character. I won't go too deep into my problems with Glammike here because that would be a 10-page paper worth of writing. Maybe I'll do that for the next hot take video. All I'll say is that it feels like a theory born out of people wanting to give Michael a redemption arc and characterization that he just doesn't have. We're only counting the games. I just find it so weird that people can't accept Freddy just being a nice guy and needing to find a reason for him helping Gregory. Why do people treat Freddy as the only one acting weird when everyone else is trying to kill a child? Honestly, it drives me nuts that a lot of people feel the need to attach old characters to new characters instead of letting the new characters be new characters. This got very rambly, but I hope it's not too confusing. Love your videos and I always look forward to them. Thank you. I kind of agree, because I feel the same way about every character becoming one of the bullies from FNAF 4, like Cassie's dad was the Bonnie bully, and now folks are thinking that Arnold might have been the father of the Chica bully, yada yada yada. I can see that, having just a new character crop up and then having them just be an old character. It doesn't always work, because usually the way it happens is that one of the characters is not fleshed out enough and is being placed on top of an already fleshed out character. In this case, Michael, who didn't really get a lot of screen time, but was a very well-known character, by name but not by his personality, would be being planted on top of Glamrock Freddy, a very fleshed out character in and of himself. And really, this boils down not to Glamrock Freddy being too alive to exist. This really has to do with, and I believe this truly, people wanting a more satisfying finale for Michael's character arc, because if you think about it, Michael was basically introduced in Sister Location and then died in the game right afterwards. He only had one voice line, but over the games he's been teased and painted as this bigger character. But he really kind of wasn't. So wanting him to be Glamrock Freddy has less to do with Glamrock Freddy and more to do with Michael himself. And with where we are in the game series, there's not really much we can do about poor Michael. That one guy from that one time says, I am leaving my hot take here because I don't know where else to put it, but I hate it when someone complains about a brand evolving, like saying old FNAF was better when it was just the first 6 games or 4 games. I know it's not just a FNAF thing, and it happens with every fandom, but it just irks me. I agree, because most of the time, it's not taking in the full picture into account. Yes, the first 6 games were very good, but there have been good, fun games afterwards. And yes, the story is a little convoluted now, but actually the story was a little convoluted back then too. But at the end of the day, Brands do have to evolve, and they have to keep trying things, and they have to keep moving forward, because if they don't, they stagnate. Because the answer isn't always as simple as, well, okay, this series has gone on for a couple of games, let's just end it right now and never mention it again. There are surely some series that might have had a more conclusive ending if they stopped a little earlier, but on the other hand, there's a lot of stuff that FNAF wasn't able to venture into in those first 6 games. I think people have kind of forgotten that back then, one of the most requested features was that the games became free roam, and that there was a more open map in the games, and now that we're kind of getting it, people are kind of thinking, well, you know, we could go back to the old games. The old games were perfect. The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. Okay, here's one that's not actually a hot take, it was actually kind of a premonition. 3PO Toru writes, hot take. The Five Nights at Freddy's chapter in Dead by Daylight will not only bring in a new wave of fresh FNAF fans, but will also rekindle a lot of old fans' love for the series. The age range of Dead by Daylight lines up perfectly with people who grew up on FNAF, and I think being in Dead by Daylight will give it the most mainstream appeal since pre-Security Breach. The movie hype won't even top it. Hope this makes it in. Your videos were one of the reasons I started making FNAF content, and it would be awesome to be in one of your videos. Thank you so much. Here you are. And you know what? You were pretty right. Well, I mean, the movie thing, maybe, I don't know about the movie comparison, but I have noticed that since the Dead by Daylight collab, there has been a lot more interest, and it certainly gave Springtrap, a character who can't appear in the mainline games anymore because he's been thoroughly killed off, a time to shine, and one in his own pocket dimension where he can be at his peak without it messing with the main story at all. So it definitely worked out in the franchise's favor. Clarence and Jenny McNeil writes, hello ma'am, DA, the green cartoon hyena here. Sorry for wasting your time again, but for another hot takes to add to your video and my previous. Not wasting my time at all, by the way. Glad to have ya. 1. Why do they have a sign in Security Breach for Monty not to enter that lower room? Obviously he's gone down there before and messed some stuff up. 2. If Bonnie was so popular, why not deactivate Monty and fix up Bonnie? I mean, like, literally the children in the game seem to not like him, so why even start with him? Not just within the games, but Steelwool themselves seems like they care more about Bonnie than Monty, not even giving him a deeper story arc, and yet they gave more to Roxy. She just had a redemption arc, so what's the actual point of Monty? Roxy definitely got her redemption arc because she was so very popular with the fans. As for Monty makes a little more sense if you think about it in universe. Bonnie probably wasn't a very popular character at the Pizzaplex. He probably was just that other one. Freddy's a nice, kind leader, family-friendly, sort of Mickey Mouse face of the franchise. Chica is the pink prissy girl who has the food thing and the mazer size sort of thing. That's her total deal, is just being the peppy one. Roxy is the cool chick who is so beloved that for some reason employees have pictures of her up in their office, assuming that they're not, like, mandated by Fazbear Entertainment. And then there's Bonnie. Bonnie who has a sweatband like he's supposed to be in mazer size, but isn't for some reason. Bonnie who runs the bowling alley, something that probably isn't going to be that popular with kids. I mean, bowling is fun for kids, but compared to laser tag and extreme golf, extreme-ish golf, and go-karts and games, I don't think bowling would be on the top of anyone's list. Unless it was like a party. Bonnie is basically Freddy 2.0, so it makes sense that when the company had a situation where Bonnie was kind of dismantled and they couldn't find him and it was going to mean that they would have to get a replacement, they said, you know what? Actually, we've got Monty, an edgy character who can relate to older teens. Let's bring him in and have him be the 4th band member, and then we can hit up this entirely new demographic that wants something cooler but doesn't want to go with the Roxy chic theme. As for, like, Monty himself not getting much time, I don't think it's a matter of not liking Monty. I think it's actually a result of that popularity from Security Breach. Roxy was so insanely popular. The daycare attendant was so insanely popular. And because of that, both of them have gotten more attention. Glamrock Chica is not the most popular Chica, but she was definitely more popular than Monty. so he kinda just got the short end of the stick. It's not fair, but it explains it. 3. Secret of the Mimic is great, but why do we need 2 or 3 dogs in FNAF? I like dogs, but just why? Yeah, I gotta agree. I don't understand why we suddenly got so many dogs all at once. I mean, I was all geared up for a dog since, the whole Sparky thing kinda didn't happen and Fetch isn't really, outside of the books. But it is kinda odd that we got 2 completely different dogs. We got Sharpay, who has a hair salon. Okay, neat, cool. But then we also got this reveal of a Sparky-like dog named Bub, who was apparently one of the main Freddy characters, or Fredbear characters, or Murray characters back from yesteryear, though unlike Monty, she never came back again. It is weird to have that just caveat sort of there. 4. Why doesn't anyone theorize Bonnie possibly being a villain, knowing how FNAF loves to play with foreshadowing? I like Bonnie, but Glamrock Bonnie feels kind of overloved for no reason but nostalgia purposes. And if that's so, then why is Roxanne so loved? Bonnie is actually not loved because of nostalgia purposes. Bonnie is loved because of the tragic story accompanying him. From the moment Freddy said, "There's no rabbit at the Pizzaplex anymore," Bonnie became a big deal. Because now there's this whole tragic story of Freddy having this dear friend of his who's gone. And we don't know where he went. And then everyone's trying to figure out where he went. And then we do find out where he went, and it's very sad. And that's why Glamrock Bonnie is loved. It doesn't have to do with other Bonnies. It doesn't have to do with nostalgia. It has to do with that story surrounding him. And I think we both know why Roxanne is so loved. 5. Why do some fans talk about Withered Chica's weight? Withered Chica's weight, when the animatronics all basically have the same figures, and when Toy, Funtime, and Glamrock seemed so loved. Not that people don't like her, I'm just perplexed on why the Withered seems to get picked on. It's because of her getting stuck in the vent. I can absolutely guarantee it has to do with her Winnie the Poohing in that vent. 6. Seriously, why is Vanessa a favorite again? I like her as a villain character, but even that, we don't get much of that. It definitely probably has to do with her sad backstory and the fact that she is partially Vanny, because as we know, Vanny was very, very popular even before we knew anything about her. So just being Vanny bumps her up quite a bit. 7. I think I asked this, but we all say Vanessa was hypnotized and innocent. But does anyone think maybe, just maybe, Monty was hacked when he killed Bonnie? I'm just saying that if we're gonna play the whole animatronics are just kids card, then why don't we see Monty like that? Okay, so 2 things about that. 1, I don't think Vanessa was entirely innocent. She was possessed and couldn't control what she was doing. But also, I picked one out, it will be fun. Glitch Trap gave her some leeway to work alongside him. And the fact that he was able to do that and she went along with it, it's not a good look. I mean, sure, she couldn't say no, but also it wasn't like he took control of her entirely. There were at some points when she was actively involved. As for Monty, the thing about the Monty being possessed thing is it is possible, but I don't actually see very much reason why. What we know is that Monty was the aggressive type and he was the jealous type. He gets frustrated and breaks things easily. We know that he has some sort of a vendetta against Freddy since fantasizes about replacing him. And we also know that Bonnie's body was just abandoned. It wasn't like Vanny got rid of Bonnie and then used it. She was in the security office for Bonnie Bowl, and I do find some of the situations surrounding Glamrock Bonnie very suspicious. Things like him and Glitch Trap pulling the same pose that one time. That could have been a coincidence. It probably was a coincidence, but it's weird that it happened in the same game. But the root of the issue is there's actually not really any evidence that Monty was possessed. But there are people who believe he was, so it is a possibility. 8. On that note, do you think Monty might have had anger issues because he can't remember that event and others are treating him differently? Because I think you said in the video Monty felt more like a Looney Tunes character in the book VIP. He did, and notably that was before what happened with Bonnie. Honestly, okay, my best guess, I don't actually think that Monty would have murdered Bonnie just to get his place. From what we see in the games, from what the timeline is, Bonnie went into the arcade and then he went into Monty Golf, if I'm correct. We never see Bonnie leave Monty Golf, but we do see Bonnie back at the bowling alley, wrapped up in a rug, broken up into pieces, like he had been transported in a rug, probably by Monty. He also has a significant amount of damage that matches the same as Monty had when he fell off the catwalks. I think, and since we don't know Bonnie's behavior or personality, I think we know that Monty is a hothead. Bonnie must have waltzed into Monty Golf, probably somewhere up on the catwalks for some reason, because there's obviously another way up there, we just don't know how to get there. He walks up to Monty, he starts running his mouth about something, as confirmed by Monty's voice actor. Apparently Monty has some sort of notice me senpai behavior with Freddy, despite the fact that he wants to replace him. I don't necessarily think that he went out of his way to damage Bonnie. I think Monty got ticked off and went "Urgh!" and just attacked him like he does everything else. Bonnie crashed over the side, got broken up, and Monty was like, "Oh my god, I killed someone." And then he death rolled him, got all of his pieces, put him into some rug, picked him up, carried him over to Bonnie Bowl, and then set it up so it would look like a slip and fall. That's the thing that gets me most of all. That's what makes me think that Monty probably wasn't purposefully trying to kill Bonnie, because his cover-up was absolutely the goofiest thing I've ever seen. That absolutely matches that Looney Tunes character in VIP. He actually genuinely believed someone would come in there and see Bonnie torn to shreds and really think he slipped and hit himself with his own bowling ball. 9. Because FNAF loves foreshadowing, do you think Mangle's personality was kind of like that bully from the other FNAF book? I hope not, because I love Mangle, but they do seem feisty sometimes. No, probably not. I think it's just a coincidence. 11. Who would you play if you played in the FNAF movie or game? Probably Charlie. She's the only one I could do. And I would specifically be the kind of funky-looking, off-kilter Charlie from the Twisted Ones graphic novel, where occasionally in the right light I look kinda cute, but then most of the time I'm just pulling this face. 12. Jackie needs more love, or at least a comeback. Jackie absolutely needs to come back. Jackie needs to come backy. 13. Most people know Circus Baby is a baby, right? And speaking of FNAF romance, do you think Balloon Boy and Circus Baby should have had something together? No. No. I think Circus Baby is a weird situation, because she is stylized like a baby, but FNAF has repeatedly tried to put her in the role of someone older, from giving her a voice that sounds somewhat older to the entirety of what happened in the fourth closet. It's a very strange conundrum. I don't think it would work. And I don't just mean because she's like 6 feet taller than him. I couldn't see it. 14. I can't see the FNAF 2 movie yet, but how come they could show Mangle's full body in the trailers? I wanted to see the whole animatronic. Spoiler alert! You will! Thank you, ma'am, for reading my comments. Hope these get in the video. Love, D.A. the Green Hyena. No problem. Hope to see you again. Ashton Sherrod writes, here's my hot take on Security Breach Ruin. Security Breach Ruin was good, and I think it was good for Security Breach, but I feel like it's more of a band-aid to put on the severed arm that was the horrid state of Security Breach on release. Not to mention the fact that so much was cut from Security Breach that the game wasn't what it was supposed to be. I like Ruin, but it felt more like a band-aid, and fan service rather than a proper DLC. Not saying the story or gameplay of Ruin is bad, just wish it had better circumstances and a better main game to live side by side with, if that makes any sense. Plus, I think Ruin was too short, and I would have loved a more open map to Ruin while still being objective-based. Not as open as Security Breach, but a little more open. To me, Ruin felt way too confined. It would have been cooler, in my opinion, if the ruined Pizzaplex was more open. I agree, but kind of Ruin was held back by what it was, and that was a DLC made to somewhat patch together, like you said, some of the circumstances around Security Breach. Security Breach ended on a kind of odd note. Not everyone was pleased with what they got, and Steelwool decided they were going to make, or I'm assuming they decided, they were going to make this DLC that would add a little more meat to a game that had big issues with it. And in ways, Ruin does improve on Security Breach's formula, but also it's not a full game. It is really just a chunk of game, but because it's so separated from Security Breach, taking place at a similar but different map, at a different time period, but almost about the same time. So it feels like its own new game that's not very long, but also it feels like a DLC that's a big deal, if that makes any sense. Super New writes, I don't know when you're doing another hot take video, but I guess I'll post it here in case you're ever planning on doing one. I'm honestly interested to hear what you would say about this, but my hot take is I freaking hate Glamrock Freddy and do not understand why so many people love him. He is a moron who continuously makes the situation worse and knows full well that what he is leading you to will not work. I began hating him when he told me to go to the fire exit, which I couldn't get to until I needed a passkey of some kind, which I think was on the other side of the Pizzaplex. It's been a while since I played through the game, but I go and get the passkey only to come back and have Freddy be like, you can't go through the fire escape because it's only accessible to high-ranking people who work at the Pizzaplex. It's not a very good security measure, like, if you know that it's only accessible to high-rank... Oh, okay, sorry, you're not doing the voice anymore. I'm gonna keep doing it in Freddy's voice. The only accessible to high-ranking people who work at the Pizzaplex. Then why the hell did I drag you all the way around the Pizzaplex just to try to come here? You moron. Later on, he's found in Roxy Raceway for no real reason because he's trying to get to the maintenance area, even though that's not how you get there. And there's no explanation beyond that as to why he's there, and this leads to him getting out of power and damaged, eventually kidnapped by Moon, waste your time and leave you to have to go rescue him, which wouldn't have happened if he went to the maintenance area through the stage or through his own elevator in his room. Like every freaking thing this dumbass asks me to do with some fetch quest that requires me to run across the entire pizza place just to open up a door only to figure out that we can't do anything here, so we have to go across the pizza place again for some other asinine reason. And all of this is because this dumbass, you don't step into the charging station at the very beginning of the game to keep his batteries up instead of running out of batteries at the beginning of the game, preventing us from leaving the Pizzaplex before it closed while we were leaving his room through the vents like you got nothing better to do and yet you're just standing there wasting your battery power. Okay, you're absolutely 100% right. Glamrock Freddy is a little bit of a hot mess. But the reason people like Glamrock Freddy, despite him making a ton of stupid decisions, is twofold. Firstly, because he does seem to genuinely care and has a lot of heart, which is rare in FNAF. Most of the characters we have established are either murderous or swamped in trauma that leads to them making questionable decisions. Glamrock Freddy is just Glamrock Freddy. Importantly, Freddy does seem to become more aware of the danger, at least by the time he encourages Gregory to leave. The saving grace of an airhead character is their ability to have moments of clarity. Anonymous writes, Hot take 1. Eclipse should have been the one to rescue Cassie. It would have dealt with the Roxy problem that people have mentioned about her dying and coming back a few minutes later, thus making her death seem more hollow. Plus, it would have given Eclipse something else to do, because he was only here for a minute and God only knows when, if we'll see him again. FNAF World 2? Help Wanted 3? Security Breach 2? Perhaps in the vein of Obsolete by Ice Tiger Kitten, where Eclipse leaves daycare after cleaning it up, realizes Cassie is still in the Pizzaplex, and goes looking for her. He is still a daycare attendant after all, and the place outside daycare is in arguably a much worse state, therefore more dangerous. Though part of me is horrified wanting this, as that likely means that Mimic would have killed him at the end. You know what? I'm glad you brought up Mimic, because there's actually, now that we've seen Secret of the Mimic, Eclipse being the one to go save Cassie and fight Mimic would have made a lot more sense. Because, in case you're not aware, Secret of the Mimic is absolutely littered with sun and moon references all over, with Fiona, not the original Fiona, but the Mimic copy, being represented as a sun woman, and Edwin, the creator of the Mimic, being referenced as a moon man, and then someone becoming the sun and moon, or splitting into sun and moon, but a different sun and moon, because Moon was reborn into another moon. Edwin Moon became a Jester Moon that looks just like Moon, the one from Security Breach. Needless to say, in a funny way, the Eclipse actually has a long-standing history with the Mimic, even though we wouldn't have known it before Secret of the Mimic. So, if in a sequel, the Eclipse came out as a major character going up against the Mimic, it would actually make a lot of sense. Hot take 2. There should have been something else to do in the daycare. As I realized when rewatching your Why We Love Sun and Moon vid, I realized our brief respite from the horror was super brief. Literally, soon as we get in and Sun plops us down next to the barrels, we knock them over to run to the counter. Grab cards, lights go out, and Moon is on the hunt. Why couldn't we have a mini game to play in there or something? I am not counting Balloon World, given where it is and the things you have to do to reach it. Plus, that's the loft, not the daycare proper. Honestly, I agree, and I think that the simplest option would have been like a sort of practice run of the Moon boss fight with Sun. By which I mean some sort of brief minigame where Sun sort of chases or follows Gregory through the play structure, or perhaps Gregory needs to go through the play structure for some reason while Sun is watching. This would do two things. One, it would give the player a sort of feel of the layout of the playground area before we're sent into it. But also, it would, give us a little more time in the daycare. Something a little light and fun before the lights go out and the whole scenario swaps. So yeah, honestly, I agree. Hot take 3. For those commenting on how Monty got the short end of the stick, I want to point out there's something he got in Security Breach that no one else did. A minigame. Chica's game was cut and put in ruin, Roxy's go-karts were out entirely, and Freddy had nothing, unless he was going to get Bonnie Bull, which also got cut. And again, not counting Balloon World because that's out of the way, Gator Golf is not hard to get to. Edit, I didn't count Phaser Blast for Freddy alone, it struck me as a place for all Glamrocks. Monty might have a minigame, but he himself kind of isn't really in the minigame. I mean, we see him towards the end, but that's where we get the hint that he has some sort of bad blood with Freddy, but it's not the same as getting like a bigger one-on-one interaction with him. Which we do get some of that with Monty, but it's just not as much as we get from Chica and Roxy, especially when they came back and help wanted to swingin', and Monty kinda didn't. Oh, and Ruin, of course. Hot take 4. Things may or may not have changed, as this was mentioned in an earlier Hot Takes video, but I don't really get the Tape Girl confusion, at least regarding the rogue indie developer thing. I fail to see how this muddles the previous lore when it's most likely Fazbear trying to cover their assets. Would you want to take your kids to a place where there's a 50-50 chance your kid might go missing and never be seen again? If that was common and confirmed knowledge, probably not, which in turn would decrease their money. So the thing is, I get why Fazbear Entertainment is trying to cover it up by drawing attention and making it reframed to make it seem like rumors. But the thing is, it seems like there's like so much information that they can't cover up unless FNAF takes place in some sort of dystopian future where they have complete control of the news. Because you can say now there's a lot of fake news in the world, but usually if you look up and do your research, you can find the real facts behind things. You just have to look a little harder. But this makes it seem like these deaths that were only about 40, 50 years ago have been completely stricken from the record, which, yeah, it's a little bit of a pill to swallow, but I suppose crazier things have happened. Hot take 5. Steel Wool, in this case, should have stuck to their guns when it came to Security Breach, because there are lots of plot holes after the fact. For instance, in the Save Vanny ending, the Pizzaplex is still standing. All that are broken are the Glamrocks, and we saw they got fixed up in another ending, so they absolutely could do it in this one. Why abandon the place when it was still mostly in working order? Fazbear might be wasteful, but that's extremely wasteful. You might say it's because the blob woke up and wrecked the place after the fact, but there's another plot hole. That's actually... So, it's less of a plot hole and more just the plot itself didn't express itself properly. Here's what we know. After Ruin, the entire Pizzaplex caved in. From the newspapers, they say it was an earthquake. And we can see very early in the game, right after we see those newspapers, we see the blob in this part of the Pizzaplex far away from the basement. We know the whole thing was built very shoddily. That's why Roxy Raceway was kept falling in on itself. We know Fazbear Entertainment is really cheap. We also know that Chica, Monty, and Roxy's damage is the same damage they got during that one night in security breach. Because it's gotten worse, but it comes from the same root. This isn't new damage. This is the same damage that's just gotten worse. So, the Fazbear Entertainment didn't come in and fix them back up, because Chica's still missing the beak, and the whole thing is taken out. Roxy's still not only missing her eyes, but she's still complaining about Gregory taking her eyes. If she had been repaired and then lost her eyes again, I don't think Roxy would have lost her eyes twice. And Monty's, you know, he's looking pretty bad there. So, the story is actually there. The problem is, the way you get the answers for what happened to the Pizzaplex is by reading a newspaper pasted on the wall, one that you actually cannot see if you have the graphics turned down. When you have the graphics turned down, it's muddled. You have to see that. You also have to see that blob cameo towards the beginning of the game, which you can walk by if you're not careful. And then that's how it comes together. It's just sort of branching those two things together. The blob is here. Oh, that's because it escaped the basement. Notably, and this is one thing that actually should be extremely noted, there wasn't, from what we can see, a fire at the Pizzaplex. I mean, maybe somewhere deep inside we can see remains of fire, but most of the places just fell into itself. There's not evidence of a fire. And the only other ending that would likely be canon would probably be the burn trap ending, and that one ends with, again, a big roaring fire. So, they actually did stick to their guns. The thing is just that there are very small details that you have to kind of squint to find. Hi, future naughty name butting in here. Apparently I lost the plot somewhere during this hot take. The take was specifically asking why Fazent didn't come back and wasted all this money. Not whether or not this ending made any sense. I don't know where I went off with that. But my guess is that the price to rebuild this shoddily built place just wasn't worth the effort. Even with their terribly wasteful spending, it would be cheaper to write it off, claim the insurance from this act of God earthquake, since it's declared a natural occurrence instead of due to Fazbear Entertainment's cheapness, and move elsewhere. Actually, Fazent probably made a killing off of this place collapsing. They tried minimal efforts to rebuild, and then they just probably claimed that they couldn't, washed their hands, and took whatever insurance they had on the place and bailed. Because the Pizzaplex was definitely losing money because of their wasteful practices, throwing away staff bots, Roxy Raceway constantly being closed down. It didn't matter how much they jacked up the price on all the food and stuff like that. They were working at a loss. There's just no two ways about it. Which means this spontaneous earthquake was exactly what they would have wanted. They were able to wipe their hands clean of the Pizzaplex, get a tidy little neat bundle of money from it, and now they don't even have to touch this place again. Because they said they couldn't, they can just go somewhere else and leave everything that's already here to continue rotting away. That is diabolical. William Afton would be proud. Oh. Whoops, there was actually more to that. Sorry. We don't know how long it's been hanging around down in the basement, but it's been sitting there for probably over a year, as how else would it have gotten down there after the Pizzaplex was built? But then it wakes up. In the burn trap ending, it kinda makes sense. There was a commotion that got its attention, and likely the fire was well. But in the new canon ending, the sinkhole and burn trap don't come up. So why, in between security breach and ruin, does the blob suddenly wake up unprovoked, unless Vanessa Vanny provoked it in Help Wanted 2, and go, we gotta get the hell out of here before it's smashing its way out? Because, well, there's actually like 4 or 5 options to this. If the burn trap ending isn't canon, and the Mimic is actually down there, and something like the Mimic woke up and caused the blob to run off, and then Vanessa and Gregory went down to deal with the Mimic, that's a possibility. It could be that Vanny was helping keeping the blob subdued while she was running around down there, and with her no longer being active, that caused the blob to go cuckoo bananas. It could be because Glitch Trap was smushed and out of the equation, and that caused the blob to go cuckoo bananas. Keep in mind that the blob wasn't like in a comatose state. It was down there sleeping. It was snoring. It was actively moving. That thing could have just woken up because a fire alarm went off. Fire or not. But I digress. Hot take 6. What was the point of the blob's cameo in Ruin? As far as I'm aware, it doesn't appear anywhere else, nor does it do anything. It's still in the Pizzaplex, so what? I think it was mostly just to confirm that the blob exists. That's, from what I take from it, it was just like a confirmation that the blob was real. Hot take 7. Security Breach's dialogue needed some more tweaking. Probably not that much of a hot take, but while rewatching the Sun and Moon show play Security Breach, I noticed something that I thought was weird and wanted to bring it up and see what you think. After the whole Indo encounter and when you return to Parts and Service and hear the conversation between Vanessa and Freddy, Vanessa tells him that she found Gregory and locked him up in the Lost and Found. Fair enough. But at the end, after she tells Freddy to chill headless for a while, she says, I gotta find that kid. I gotta find that kid. But didn't you just say a moment ago that he was in Lost and Found, Vanessa? Why do you need to go find him if you already know where he is? I listened carefully 2 more times, both someone else's video and when I played through the game on Switch. Didn't hear any pause or noises that might have suggested that Moon or Chica or someone else called and said, hey, the kid's loose at any point during the conversation. Why didn't Moon grab him, by the way? Freddy was down and couldn't do anything to stop him. Likely due to cut content, but still confusing in game. And while Vanny already knew since Gregory gave her the slip, Vanessa theoretically doesn't. Regardless of whether or not Vanessa is aware of what Vanny's doing. I don't care enough about either to check. My give a crap was spent on Tape Girl, whom I also don't care that much about. Okay, so yes, you are correct. There was some issues with the dialogue, and it was left over from probably the mini story changes. Another big example that you probably know of is the, but Freddy, more people are going to go missing line that comes up absolutely unprovoked because there's not been anyone missing mentioned before now. And then we find out in the ending, yes, apparently there were some people missing. There was a lot of changes in the story, and because of that, some of the dialogue some aspects of the dialogue were kind of left behind. There was artifacting of this story that doesn't exist anymore. So I would say that one of 2 things. That was just a line that didn't get fixed, or that was just like an oopsie, like a genuine oopsie that someone has when they're writing. That happens. It happens, but still, it's a relatively small issue, but it is noticeable when it happens more than once. Hot take 8. I do not like one of Toy Bonnie's AR lines. My star is rising, and yours, sadly, is fizzling out. Sounds odd to me, and I don't know why. Why not, my star is rising, and yours is falling? Or is he just trying to be annoying? It should be rising and falling, you're right. You know what, I have a thing just like this. It's that puppet line where it's like... what is that puppet line that drives me insane? Hold on. Oh yeah, that's the line. Seeing you powerless is like music to me. Seeing you is like music? Do you usually see music? Okay, the puppet having chromesthesia would have actually been really cool. That's when you see colors when you hear sounds. But I don't think that was what it was going for. I think it was another one of those unequal comparisons. Hot take 9. This technically isn't a hot take per se, but it was something that hit me while re-listening to your second hot takes video while playing Minecraft late one morning. And if I don't mention it, it will probably stay in my thoughts forever. Plus, it got the ball rolling for the other hot takes. Metal Cat brought up that the hot take regarding Cassie already having a transponder, and while most of it slipped in one ear and one out the other, the sentence, she's, Roxy, reacting to the chip, stuck out to me and got the gears turning. I thought, what if that's how Roxy found Cassie at the end of Ruin? She locked onto the signal and followed it, thus not needing her eyes to find her way there. Not sure how much water that holds, especially because I realized something else. Roxy is a mandatory shattering in Security Breach, and you need to shatter all 3 to do the burn trap ending. Non-canon it may be now, but Roxy had to find her way down there while blind, so same thing could apply to Ruin. I mean, yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. If it's true that Cassie has a chip in her brain or a transponder in her brain, then yeah, surely Roxy could have locked onto it and followed it down there. Heck, she could have probably locked onto the Vanny mask and followed it down there. Hot take 10. I honestly believe Mexis is kind of useless as a security guard. Think about it, he can only summon animatronics to come kill Cassie, and I guess put things out to prevent her from removing the Vanny mask, but when she's in reality, he can't touch her, and in reality, she can't mess with the nodes, which applies to everyone else. If what Metal Cat suggested is correct, unless Fazbear handed transponders out like candy, not a lot of random people would have them. In theory, wouldn't that would also mean a person without a transponder wouldn't be able to work the Vanny mask? So why also didn't Vanessa make sure to not leave the mask behind, or ensure any others were gone? That's a good point. That's such a good point that I really don't have any sort of argument to it because it kind of almost feels like a plot hole, so I think you might have actually stumbled upon a plot hole. Or at least something that wasn't taken into consideration. Finally, Hot Take 11. Was Roxy really a roaming anchor? I mean, yes, you play the same minigame to shut her down, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. To quote Moon, Circus Baby, and others in Help Wanted 2, what makes you so special? What was the thought process behind this? Why did Vanessa or Mexis choose her above anyone else? If Vanessa did this, it's another reason I despise her, leaving them all to rot when they probably could have fixed them. Feels very unfair, especially since Freddy isn't much different. He can still attack Gregory in Security Breach. Personally, Monty would have been a better choice. He's so feral. How would one even get close enough to shut him off without being ripped to pieces first? It just feels like, to me, that this was another setup by the Mimic. Eclipse is busy in the daycare cleaning or waiting for children that will never come. Chica is lying dead or temporarily shut off in the bathroom. Monty was dead but alive again and still as feral as ever. The mini Music Men are prowling in a pack in Bonnie Bull. DJ Music Man is MIA in the West Arcade, and Freddy is roaming around headless, clueless, and possibly feral. I remember reading a suggestion somewhere that Freddy might not be feral. He remembers his stomach hatch was a place where Gregory hides and was trying to hide Cassie to keep her safe. So who is left that could potentially help Cassie? Roxy. Get her out of the way, and Cassie has no one to help her with the Mimic when the Mimic reveals himself and goes in for the kill. So how do you do it? Convince Cassie that she is the last node and shut her off. Simple as that. Honestly, I do believe that was the case. I think it makes more sense that Cassie gets rid of the one character who is like her favorite at Mimic's bequest. Would make a little more sense than Roxy just randomly being a security guard. That's all my hot takes for now. Love your videos and I hope I get picked. Yup, you did. P.S. Random aside, wanted to mention one thing about Freddy. Freddy's comment saying they can't hurt people in Security Breach. He conveniently forgot that Gregory isn't a guest, as stated at the beginning of the game, and therefore it's fair game to be mauled by whichever animatronic gets their hands on him. Ah, good old Freddy, forgetting the small and major details. Average Purple Pikmin writes, my hot take is that Candy Cadet in his, 2 minutes in Ruin had more lore importance than all of FNAF 1. So, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. If you mean that Candy Cadet delivered more lore in his speech than there was in FNAF 1, maybe. Because FNAF 1's story was pretty direct and Candy Cadet's backstory dump was pretty dense. But if we're saying that what he said, which is likely the backstory of Gregory running into the Mimic, was actually more vitally important in the first game's establishment of the entire series, probably not. It really comes down to the context. Have Deep Soin writes, Burntrap and the Blob have fantastic designs. If they weren't assumedly connected to any FNAF 6 lore, they would probably be more loved by the community. I agree. I haven't seen any backlash against the Blob, but a lot of the backlash against Burntrap specifically was that when he first came out, we were all pretty sure that this was just William Afton back from the grave again, and it doesn't help that he, was a deteriorated Spring Bonnie. But if Burntrap was somehow more successfully separated from the William Afton persona and the Pizzeria Simulator pizzeria entirely, his reception probably would have been at least a little better. The Blob, too, is kind of a bit confused. I've mentioned it quite a few times, but the fact that the Blob is some variation of Molten Freddy, but not entirely, has somewhat shortchanged the potential of what it could have been. It's led to some confusion about what it is, to be frank. Though, I do find that there is a big difference between the two. Burntrap did kind of get the short end of the stick, while the Blob kind of just avoided this, and I think that has to do with what the Blob is. It has a very cool, unique design. This giant amalgam lump of wires and sludge. People are a little more willing to overlook the connection since it's so diabolical. But, yes, I agree. Peace sells, right? My hot take is that people should have never taken the book as canon for theories. Scott said they weren't canon to the games, only parallels, but I think people kind of forgot about that after a while. I noticed that people are starting to do the same thing with the movies too. It kind of drives me a little crazy. Sorry if this makes no sense. No, it makes a lot of sense. In fact, I'm going to be very brief here because I have a lot to say about this later on, but I will say this. Scott made it clear when the trilogy came out that the books were canon but in a separate continuity. I don't remember how he said it, but he said something like that, which means it is technically real, but it's not the same as the games. And the problem is, because there were so many missing gaps in the games, people were going to the books more often than not. But not all of the books were entirely reliable on the story of the games. And because of that, that's led to a lot of confusion. Even nowadays, the books are used to fill in gaps that we don't know if they actually fill in or not. And it's hard to tell when something is just a reference to something that happened, or if it's a hint that that's actually what happened. It can be a bit muddling, if you know what I mean. Here's a weird example that I just pulled off the top of my head. So in the story with Delilah, I think it was Delilah, and the Ella doll, where she sees it following her around and she gets more frantic and more panicked, and then at the end, she runs off to a construction site and climbs into a vent and dies. Now, this could be a reference to that, we found a dead body in a vent once line. But for a while, people were actually really taking this as the canonical, confirmed identity of who was in that vent. And I don't know if I'd put that much stock into that. But, whatever floats your boat. Cruise Games writes, hot take, Vanny being inspired by old women and women. Sorry. Take two. Hot take, Vanny be inspired by old William instead of being possessed. I know it isn't really him, but for all intents and purposes it's basically him. Wouldn't have solved her issues, as most came from her role being sunk in security breach, from main antagonist to one of the enemies. At least that's what the marketing implied. And the Mimic would be better received if it wasn't a book character, as it isn't a bad idea even if he did still mimic Afton. The change is at a flawed copy, as realistically it would have only had stories and maybe some old fast footage, could be interesting, but because it was in the books first, people tend to focus on that can of worms, a book character being canon to such a degree of main villain status, instead of a simple wink and nod like if it was the logbook. People would think, oh, nice reference, instead of, so is everything in the books canon like Fazgood or just the Mimic? And to what degree? Is it like one-to-one or just a basic concept? Also, first time commenting, and I love your work. Thank you. So I'm kind of split on this. Not the Mimic part, the Mimic coming out in the books first, and how he was introduced initially, not in Secret of the Mimic, but in the Ruin, suddenly popping. Okay, yeah, that was kind of a little bit of a situation there. Not talking about that, I'm talking about the Vanny thing. The idea of her being inspired by William instead of being possessed might have helped some aspects of her, and I mean specifically what we're hitting right now. Okay, so let's look at the situation right now. Glitch Trap is gone, and Vanessa is still around. Now, if this was a situation where Vanessa was a copycat going along with this, she could go back into her Vanny persona, and there wouldn't have to be any situation where it's like, oh, it's a split personality, or the Vanny virus corrupted the Mimic, and it's a mimic of Vanessa. It would just be, this is Vanessa, she's a copycat killer. She's still going along. But now, because we added in this entire plot about her being possessed, and her tragic backstory, and her thing about her daddy, and her thing about Afton being her daddy, Springtrap really knows how to multiply. We have a little more trouble working Vanny back into the plot, which wouldn't be a problem if Vanny never came back, but it seems like from what I've seen in interviews that there is an interest in bringing Vanny back, despite the fact that she keeps getting cut from the games she's reintroduced in. So, If this was a situation with a copycat, bringing Vanny back would have been easier, but since it's not, it's going to be a little more difficult. That being said, I do think that you're correct about the reception of Vanny and Vanessa. The cuts are where everything went wrong. If she was still a copycat killer, but her entire role got cut and changed at the last moment, yeah, we would still be in the same boat. We'd just have an easier time to bring Vanny back later. Cheesy B writes, I've said it 1,000 times, the over-reliance on making William Afton responsible for literally every bad thing that's ever happened in this series, no matter how small it really is, starting to hurt the franchise. What do we gain from him running over David or starting the Fall Fest fire? What do we gain from the Fnaf 4 house being Edwin's that Afton stole from him? Why are the animatronics killing night guards in Fnaf 1? They're mistaking you for Afton. What about the non-haunted ones in Fnaf 2? Mistaking you for Afton. We had a chance to do something similar but different with Vanny, and they immediately bail on the idea after barely 3 games. How do we finally move to a new villain in the Mimic, and the only person it wants to mimic is Afton? I half agree with this. Afton being the one to hit David actually is pretty in character for Afton, especially since we go back in time. That's not to say that I think full stop Afton did kill David, but it would make a lot of sense since we know during that game that Afton was trying to basically break Edwin down, destroy his company so that he could claim all of his assets. In that situation, it actually makes sense. Making Afton the sole cause of everything else, yeah, that's a little too much. And the fact that Mimic is now mimicking Afton is kind of an issue. See, the Mimic has a lot of potential, but by putting him in the same role as Afton, which they started to do when they introduced him, they kind of didn't give the Mimic a chance to be its own character. It just became a duplicate of Afton. So having the Mimic separate itself from Afton, at least from this point going forward, would probably be a good idea. It is time to move in some new villains, and we have the opportunity to do so. We have Fazbear Entertainment being just the worst company altogether. We have some sort of possession situation with Vanny that's still circulating around, and we have the Mimic who mimics anything, so he doesn't have to mimic Afton anymore. So, we have the layout to move on to new villains now, and likely we might. Call Me Luna writes, my hot take is, Sun and Moon should have gotten more screen time. They are one of my favorite FNAF characters, lol. I agree. Anytime these two show up on screen, it makes my day. Bradley Rutledge writes, not sure if this is a hot take, but if Dead by Daylight was to do another collab with FNAF, the Marionette should be the killer. I know the devs said they would probably do the Mimic, but I think you could come up with some really interesting mechanics for Marionette, especially if you combine elements from her game and movie counterparts. Also, what were thoughts on JT Music's FNAF song Tears in the Rain? It's gotta be a top 5 in my opinion, if not top 3. I have not heard that song, I'll have to go listen to it. And I agree, I love the Marionette. I think it's a really cool character, and I think it would be really neat to play as it. I love its design. I always have, and I always will, and I think it'd be really cool. Funny enough, I did not place these two hot takes beside each other, but I think they actually play into each other. If Dead by Daylight introduces the Mimic, we know the Mimic. It can switch suits, it can change size. It's likely going to turn into another Afton. Unless it was just like a skin for Afton, the Mimic would probably just, with how it is, unless they made a specific map where it could change into different costumes, but in that case, suddenly it wouldn't be easy to play the Mimic on any other map. Unless they did that, the Mimic would end up being another Afton. And that's unfortunate because the Mimic does have a really cool gimmick. I just don't see how you could make it work in Dead by Daylight. I definitely think the Marionette would be a cool choice. I guess having just like a regular Freddy Fazbear would also work, or like a nightmarish version of Freddy. Maybe even something like Ignited Freddy might work, but I think they'd have trouble getting that licensing all worked out together, if you get my drift. Emerald Bryce writes, I'll shoot my shot at getting in another Hot Takes video with some movie ones, since I have a couple of very strong opinions about it. First is that the second movie absolutely wrecks Michael Afton and Charlie. Adaptations can change things, sometimes even for the better, but I hate that they are both completely opposite to their game versions for seemingly no good reason. Charlie being like the one you shouldn't have killed, and Michael being gleefully loyal to William's legacy. My second and stronger take builds off the first. Moving Michael Afton should have been Sammy Emily instead. It would fix Michael being horribly out of character and just make more sense in general to the movie. Charlie is angry and confused from her death, and her brother is furious at what happened to his sister. He, like Vanessa, could have grown up and discovered her lost soul in the puppet, but because of the trauma of losing his sister and Henry's blatant neglectful parenting, he would likely grow up wanting to seek revenge. It would explain why he and Charlie can control the animatronics, it would explain why and how he was there guarding the location, and would explain why Charlie would be willing to trust and work with him for this revenge plot. It could even make a parallel to Henry with how he handles Charlie's grief in both the novels and games, both using her as a justification for their own revenge and as an ends to the means. It just makes so much more sense than what the movie actually went with, and would finally do something with this forgotten character. You know, I agree. And I mostly agree because I don't think the reveal of Michael Afton being Michael Afton added much to the movie, considering it came at the very end and he wasn't really in the movie. Having it be Sammy Emily, this sort of obscure character, would have given him more of a reason for some of the things he does. Why is he hanging out with Charlie? Why is he able to talk with Charlie? Why are him and Charlie somewhat working together? It would have maybe had more impact on the story itself, or at least answered a few more questions. Spring FNAF Reviews writes, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think Edwin is a much better written character than Henry, as unlike Henry in the games where he's just shoved in at the last moment with barely any characterization and then dies, Edwin is actually a fully realized and fleshed out character with proper motives and a proper reason to care about him in the story other than having a cool speech at the end of the game, and I hope future human characters in these games are written as well as Edwin, as he's become my second favorite alongside William. And I agree. Edwin was written so much better than a lot of the human characters in FNAF, and that's because a lot of the human characters in FNAF just simply don't get to have their voices heard. We've had so many silent protagonists, and the story has otherwise been so heavily guarded that a lot of these characters are kept in this state of limbo where we can't find out too much about them. Even Henry, as of Secret of the Mimic, where we learned all this about Edwin, and even a bunch more about William, we still don't even know what Henry thought about the situation or if he was truly involved with William's harsh takeover, because he's so protected by the story that we're not able to get close. With Edwin, a character who was important but not on the same tier as Henry is supposed to be, we were able to see a lot more of him. We were able to see this flawed character come out, and with that, he became much more well-written. And because of that, he felt much more like an actual character than just a name that we would recognize. And I do hope going forward that more characters get this amount of fleshing out, especially if they're characters who we have to have some sort of an emotional bond with. Aaron Johnson writes, even though I do think the Mimic worked really well as an antagonist for Secret of the Mimic, I just don't find him compelling as an overarching villain. There are no personal ties he has with Security Breach, other than just being there for no reason. It's just a robot that mimics violence. There's not much that you can do with that idea by itself. Honestly, I agree. So here's the skinny. I used to not like the Mimic at all. I didn't think the Mimic was a good idea, and I didn't think the Mimic made for a great villain. Secret of the Mimic came out. I really like the Mimic now. I think he does make for a really good villain, and I do think that the other version of him, M1, also makes for a good villain. But the idea of them being the main villain, the main overarching villain, I could see that becoming an issue pretty quickly, because eventually the problem that we might come across is, what is the Mimic doing? If the Mimic is trying to rebuild David and rebuild its family, I don't know how much of a plot that can push along. That can definitely push around its specific plot, but I don't see it having an easy time pushing along the major plots, like opening new franchises. Secret of the Mimic is a game that, even though it has big repercussions on the entire series, it is very domestic. It's very personalized towards the Mimic. But once we get out of Murray's costume manner going forward, it will be a little harder to have the Mimic itself spark new events for the games to take place in. The Mimic itself cannot build a new location, it can only infect one that's already opened. So it would probably work best as a secondary villain behind something else. That doesn't mean that the Mimic is not a good villain, but there definitely has to be, we need to get someone else also in here. I'm not sure who. I know M1 can hack into things and take control of locations, but I think we need something else. I think we need something a little more human. And I'm not saying like a direct William Afton copy, but just something to keep the plot driving forward. Skybalking writes, I don't have a hot take. Can I be in a video? And I said, I'm going to at least need your favorite and least favorite animatronic. And they said, favorite animatronic is the puppet, least favorite is Toy Freddy.
Would you like me to be your friend?
No, they wouldn't, buddy. Yui Link Matt writes, FNAF needs another human villain unrelated from Afton. Yeah, that was exactly what I was saying a few minutes ago. Chris Zappis writes, Fnaf AR was actually very fun. It is a shame it was so poorly optimized and was full of microtransactions because it could have been a fantastic game. I agree. I had a lot of difficulty playing it, but I actually did enjoy it. If it had functioned a little better, or at least if it had like an autosave feature where it would be able to recognize when you were booted and not penalize you for it, it would have definitely been a cool game to play. Microtransactions definitely needed to be tweaked a bit as well. If it ever came back, I would welcome it. I would hope that it would have some changes to make it play better and to make it so that you can get rewards without having to spend so much money, but I would also be happy that it was coming back. Ice Captain says, an official Fredbear game would be great. To give Henry more character, maybe more on Charlie as the only real info is in the puppet minigame in the books, as well as the Afton children. To know the relationship between the Afton and Emily's. Now, I agree, but I want to bring up something that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Edwin. The problem with the Fredbear game is, even now, as of Secret of the Mimic, the games have been very scarce on Henry's details. Even as recent as the last game, we couldn't really hear much about Henry, so I worry if we did have a Fredbear's Family Diner game, which would be the situation where we would finally learn this information, this might still be information that we're not privy to. That we would just hear more about William Afton's earlier crimes and get maybe hints towards Charlie's death, maybe seeing her stuck outside or something, but not specifically getting anything that we don't know, if you get my drift. That's just a concern of mine. I would definitely appreciate seeing more about what was going on with these characters because we haven't seen it. I'm just a little skeptical that we would. Unless it was a Fredbear's Family Diner game where we play as the security puppet, in which case I don't care how little lore or confirmations we would actually get. I would love that. That would be so cool. I don't know how we would make it work unless it was just like a minigame segment, but it would be neat. Now, the next hot take is a special one from my friend Hair Raising Hair. But instead of me telling you about it, let's hear it from him in his own words. Take it away.
So my hot take is a 2-in-1 about Fiona. The first thing I want to say is that Fiona was the one who built all the successful blueprints, costumes, animatronics, endoskeletons, and even the Mimic. My evidence is going to be jumping all over the place in timeline, so bear with me. At the end of Secret of the Mimic, when we meet F10N4, or as I lovingly call her, F10Nor, who is just a copy of Fiona's conscious, she talks about M1 like she knows him inside and out. All throughout the game, you come across audio logs and notes left by Fiona expressing concerns about and even coming up with ways to improve Edwin's designs. Hell, she does a better job at helping you fix the elevator when she couldn't read Edwin's chicken scratches, even compensating for the weight of the Mimic cross-dressing as Molten Nurse Dolly. Fiona was the one who designed and most likely built the more sturdy spring lock designs. Geez, no wonder why Afton wanted her gone. The second part of my hot take is that Edwin wasn't sad about Fiona's death because he loved her, but because he had no idea how her art designs worked and wanted to continue mooching off of her successes under his name. Pay close attention to his notes and audio logs in Secret of the Mimic and you realize that in quite a few of them he had no idea how some of the things in the costume manor worked. A little suspicious if he was the one who built them. The things he did build were often breaking down, like the elevators, and anything of his that did work he even admitted was just lucky. Wrapping this all back up to what I said earlier, Fiona was the one who built M1 and M2, and how sturdy both of them are proves it. I'm not saying Edwin can't build things, it's just that the things he actually built were less than desirable in terms of both quality and appeal. Even the tape recorder Edwin claimed to invent when he first met Fiona was already in circulation by then. I checked. Thank you for tuning into my rabbit feed. Haha, get it? I'm an idiot.
That's not even a hot take. That's just a very dark theory. But I appreciate it. It reminds me of that situation with, the artist who was claiming his wife's work as his own and selling it, and then they went to court where they had to prove who the artist was, and she painted a painting in front of a crowd while I can't remember if he didn't show up or if he just didn't do it, but it came out that she was the one behind it the whole time. You know, that might have also happened in the 70s as well. If that was the case, that would be a pretty neat twist. I don't think that's the case, but it's a nice story to think about. Could make for a cool AU. Buzzco writes, I know it's not really that hot of a take, but no character in the series is perfectly moral, and getting annoyed by that fact takes away from the story. Absolutely agree. There is not a single character in FNAF who is absolutely perfect, except for Phone Dude, and that's just because we don't know him too well. And in fact, I think this leads into my hot take. Here is my hot take, and this comes from the movie. As you may or may not know, a while back I made a video about the puppet in the movie, and I said something. I said this. I was hoping that it would be like a nice last hurrah for a character who did a great deal for the franchise back in the old days. But instead, that character is going to be forgotten now. Most people who see this movie won't know the lore of FNAF, and Film Puppet, an angry child attacking random people and apparently teaming up with Michael Afton to complete his father's legacy, I was a little confused on what was being implied there, will become the well-known version of the marionette, while that complex black and white and gray character will be left behind for good. And I had right to be concerned, because ever since the movies come out, despite the movie being a separate continuity from the games and the books, I've been seeing a sort of tonal shift, more and more comments and posts popping up about how the puppet was actually evil the entire time, the MCI incident was entirely on their hands, none of the kids would have ever possessed any of the animatronics if it wasn't for the puppet, they would have gone off to heaven and been happy. Everything that happened in FNAF was the fault of the puppet. And not only that, the puppet wasn't just misled. It was not a protector, it was just an evil, angry, vengeful spirit, just like thrown into FNAF 2. And that's not the only thing that came from the FNAF movie that's starting to ooze in. Things like, Michael Afton was evil the entire time. He was totally on board with William, and I don't mean like going along with what William did, sort of like Vanessa did in the first movie. I don't mean like being fooled by his father. He was definitely totally in on it the entire time. He was absolutely supportive of his father's legacy, and he was actually just a cruel, heartless maniac. Other things as well. The DCI never happened. Those dead bodies in FNAF 2, they've been retconned out of the series now. They don't exist anymore. There are some weird conflicting feelings about the Withereds and classics right now, so I'm not even going to get into that. Oh, and also back on to Michael. Mike and Michael are now not the same person anymore. There's been a growing trend of belief that Mike and Michael are actually separate people. This is the only one that holds any weight, and the reason it does is because FNAF reuses the same names so frequently that it actually could be the case. But what I'm getting back to is, what I predicted actually did happen. Because of FNAF 2's reception, it's changing the way everyone thought about these characters, and not necessarily in a positive way. In some cases, it's actually taking things that we know from the games and saying that they're not true. The puppet specifically has always been a gray character. It's not black and white. It's always been a gray character. but we do know that it considers itself a protector for the other animatronics. We know it died in a horrendous incident. We know that it believed giving them life was giving them a gift. The fact of the matter is this. The puppet has always been a character who is great. It is lashing out. But its motives are absolutely not the same as the motives of Charlie Emily from the movie. I mean, specifically, we absolutely know that. The movie itself does not change the context of everything in the games. It can't possibly do that. And the reason we know it can't is because the Vanessa in the movie is not the Vanessa from the games. The situations from the movie are not the situations from the games. There are so many drastic differences between the two that it's not possible that we can say that one specific aspect of the movie is actually changing something that we knew from the games. We didn't get a lot of details from the games, but there are some things that we do know, and the fact that the movie changed them doesn't necessarily mean that we have to rewrite the entire script, if you get my drift. And why it frustrates me a little bit is the same reason I said so in the video. We have for years gotten the story drip-fed to us through these games. And we do adore this story. Even if it gets convoluted, even if it gets a little messy, we have bonded with these characters, even though we haven't been able to see a lot. And to have those characters suddenly changed to go with the script of a movie that doesn't adhere to the games exactly, it can be a little bit discouraging. But it's too late to change anything now. It's already out there. And with the puppet being how it is specifically, dead, and Michael Afton being how he is, also dead, they're probably never going to show back up again, so this is going to be the version of them that survives from this point on. And now that I've thoroughly bummed myself out, I guess it's time for us to bring this story to a close. Thank you, or not even a story, what was this, like a 2-hour tirade? Let's just cut it off here, throw some water over the flames. Take care and stay toasty.